So this is the second week in March, and while it's still cold before these start budding out, I've gone to my itchy persimmon tree. I want to graft some of these buds into American persimmon rootstock. All of this is American persimmon rootstock that's coming up. And so I'm going to take the end of 1 year's growth off of this itchy persimmon right here on the end, and I'm going to cut it off. And these little buds I'm going to put in the refrigerator until April, when I will graft them onto the American persimmon rootstock. And that way I get the strength and the energy and the vitality and the healthiness of the American persimmon rootstock, and I can graft those fuyu persimmons and itchy persimmons or hachia persimmons onto the American persimmon rootstock, and it'll produce for me. In a month or so, I'm going to be grafting some of these Scion buds onto some American persimmon rootstock. And so what I've had to do is in March, when it's still cold, at least here in South Carolina, I've got to get some 1-year-old part of the end of the branch of a persimmon tree and get these buds before they start blooming out or being, getting big. These are breaking through a little bit, getting a little bit bigger than I want them, but they're nice, fat, full, and juicy, and I need to preserve them in this state. So I cut off the ends of the branch. These are called Scions, and I'll go ahead and I've taken the shop cloth, got it wet, and wring it out. I just want it moist, I don't want it wet, and then I'll individually wrap them all up in the same cloth, and then I'll put them in this guy right here, and then put them in the refrigerator. And when I see the American persimmon rootstock starting to bud out and leaf out, I'll note that the sap is coming up from the ground, and it'll be time then to graft these buds. And what I'll simply do is cut off a bud, and then cut off a similar spot in the American persimmon rootstock, and then I will graft that on. I've had really good success last year, probably 90 to 95% success using this method. This is an example of last year having grafted a persimmon Scion bud into an American persimmon rootstock. So last year I grafted into this American persimmon rootstock a bud off of a Japanese persimmon tree. Here's the original size of that American persimmon tree, and I grafted a bud into it, and that bud last year took off. I planted it, by the way, or grafted it in April from a cutting in March that I had in the refrigerator, and this is how much it has grown just in that 1 year. So that is a lot of growth from one little bud. And I've done this over and over again. A lot of these American persimmon rootstocks, which came up, by the way, from an old fuyu tree that I had to cut down because the wind damaged it so much. And when I cut this off, it started producing all these American persimmon rootstocks, which I took advantage of and then grafted some of my fuyu and itchy Japanese persimmons into these trees. Awesome. Here's another example of a graft. This was American persimmon rootstock coming off of this old trunk here. Everything below this area right here is American persimmon, so any stock that it produces as it is dyed or cut back begins to grow up like it's grown up all over here. All these are American persimmon rootstocks. And so I took a Japanese persimmon bud and I grafted it right here, and then cut off the top so that the tree would put all its energy into this graft, this little bud that I had right here. And of course, in 1 year's time, I did this last year in April, and in 1 year's time, this is what this particular bud has done. So it's grown up quite a ways. So I've experimented because I never was good at grafting, and I've had a tremendous amount of success with this chip bud grafting. If I go in March and cut these Scions and then refrigerate them until April, until these American persimmon rootstocks start producing buds and leaves. And then I will go in at that time and start grafting. And just great success. I've also tried some other methods of grafting. Like I took a whole Scion here. Here's American persimmon rootstock. I took a whole Scion and grafted it into the side with quite a number of buds coming off. This is all that one Scion from here all the way down to there. And then I let that bud out. And so this is a bud. This is a Japanese persimmon bud that's taking off. Just another way to graft other than just bud grafting. Just took the whole Scion with a couple of buds on it and then let it take off. I think grafting is really fun if you can get your timing right. If you can get your timing right, it seems to work out pretty good. So I got all of these trees. What am I going to do with all of them? They're kind of close together. Well, I'm just going to take the healthiest ones as they begin to grow and maybe get rid of the others. This is my Fuyu persimmon tree, and I got a lot of persimmons off of it last year, and I need some Scions off of this to graft into my American persimmon rootstocks that are coming up everywhere. And so here's a Scion. It's a 1-year-old branch, and starting to produce the buds. I was hoping to let them out a little bit more, let them grow a little bit more, so I can get some nice healthy buds. Some nice healthy buds. So I'm not sure whether I should cut off these Scions yet or wait just another week or two. I don't want to wait too long. When picking a dormant Scion, go for 1 year's growth. Go where it has some significant buds coming out, and those buds look healthy. And then you'd simply go in there and you would cut that right off there, and maybe cut off the end. You don't want the ends. And then use those buds in the middle there for your bud grafting that you might be doing later on. These, of course, they get put into the refrigerator, and then they will last until another month or so, when the buds start coming out, or when you start seeing on these American persimmon rootstocks, when you start see it making leaves. See, when it starts making leaves on the American persimmon rootstock, then you know it's time to go ahead and graft those in. In Spartanburg, South Carolina, or Boiling Springs, South Carolina, that would be probably in April sometime. That's when I found it works best. And so that's when I do it. I learned so much about chip bud grafting by following this guy on YouTube. It was just awesome. He applied most of that chip bud grafting to other fruit trees, but it applies really, really well to Japanese persimmon trees when you have your rootstock that's coming up out of the ground as well. So good luck with that. I also have some videos that I've put out following this man's advice on chip bud grafting, and I've applied it and showed here how I've done this with grafting Fuyu persimmons and Ichi persimmons as well. So you can go to my channel here, Perry Rush, and look at what I've done with chip bud grafting there as well. I have a number of articles or videos with this subject.